This is ContactTalkRadio.com, consciousness in action, and you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ying.fm, and Upsnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, it's Regan here with Your Healthy Self, and today we've got a phenomenal show in store for you. And before I announce our special guest, I'm going to just thank everybody who's a part of our Health Accelerator challenges, our hacks. You guys have been awesome on there. And, last night we had an incredible challenge, which was make sure that you're going on a walk every night after dinner. So we made it was a simple challenge, but it's one that can be profound. So these small little pieces, 1% every day is all you're looking for in your health. And so for those of you who are not part of our hacks, make sure you get the golden ticket. You can go to our website, acueastwest.com, and become a member of this phenomenal community. So getting involved there, you can also reach out to me at Regan at gowellness.com. So let's jump in. So today we've got Dr. Cami Gillett, and she's a doctor of acupuncture, licensed acupuncturist. She's been practicing acupuncture and Chinese medicine since 2013. She graduated summa cum laude with her doctorate degree in 2020. She has a passion to understand both science and the art of medicine that she practices. She strives to connect to every patient on their level of healing with a teaching method that allows each patient to become health independent, empowered by knowledge of how to listen and give the body and mind what it needs to thrive. She's there in St. Peter, Minnesota. And Cami is also, we worked together for so many years. So Let's welcome Cami. Welcome. Woo.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi.
Yeah, so good to have you here. So, Cami, what was the year you came to East West? It was 2012, or was it 2013?
13, I believe.
It was, yeah. And Cami was phenomenal. Yeah, it's been a few years, but Cami was just instrumental in growing the practice, and I always appreciated, her ability to connect deeply with patients. And so now you've transformed your whole life and whole career, and you're out there on your own in Minnesota, and you've got a book that you've just released. So we're really excited to talk about it. But what's been the most surprising thing that's happened to you in the last few years?
Surprising. Wow. I don't know. There's lots. Finishing my doctorate was kind of huge, and actually finishing the book was pretty huge too. As you know, I came to you 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years ago and said, "Hey, I got an idea." And you're like, "Yeah, you should write a book." And then it got released in February, and I text you and I'm like, "It finally happened." I'm kind of a little slow on it, but I am also kind of a perfectionist inside my head, and have to make sure I just am as thorough as possible. So, yeah.
Well, and your book is called Mending the Sacred Self, a look at the biochemistry and neuroscience of esoteric practices and how they can change your experience of reality. So tell us about the esoteric world a little bit, and why you've always been fascinated with that, because you've got a bunch of different interests, but why did you decide to write the book? And I'm so proud of you for doing it, by the way.
Thank you. Well, I was really looking for validation in the mystical stuff that I was really drawn to. When I work with patients, I will feel emotions or pain, and why is that? And then I'll ask them, like, "Oh, are you sad?" I've made so many people cry, even within the staff. It was just asking, "Are you sad?" And they're like, "Oh my God." Or, "Oh, I have knee pain. Is your knee bothering you?" And just trusting that those weird insights, and then getting the validation of having patients go, "Oh yes, I wanted to talk to you about that." Or, so I was curious about, okay, so what makes that like valid? Why does meditation change people's personalities? Or why does walking on the earth help you heal better, lower inflammation? So I wanted to bridge that gap. And I kind of learned that from you with learning how to talk about acupuncture, which is traditionally of very spoken in a language that's not used for Westerners. It's used for like an Asian culture. The words within there it's all about energy, and it's words that we don't really hear or understand. So it makes it more mystical in the West.
Yeah.
And working with you and learning how to explain it in more biomedical terms and words that your audience can relate to. It builds a trust there that this isn't a belief system. It actually has an effect on the body. And so I was so interested in looking at all of that. Why does sending love and light, what effect does that have? Like, is that a real thing, or is it just that woo-woo belief stuff,
Yeah. And so what did you discover? I mean, is there some tangible things that we can measure from some of the woo-woo that I love, you love? But I get it, because in Chinese medicine, some of the terminology, if you tell a patient, oh, you've got phlegm fire misting the heart, they're going to be like, what? That sounds so weird. But if you say, oh, you're turning into, you're having panic attacks and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, then they're going to be like, okay, that makes sense. So, so what did you discover in your research?
Yeah, so I am looking a lot at how to be an observer and look objectively at a subjective experience. So looking at what's going on within you as far as emotions, behavioral patterns, thoughts, like lingering or cyclic thoughts that keep coming up. And a lot of the esoteric practices, like meditation, like gratitude, shadow work, what they're doing is it's retraining your brain. It's reprogramming the brain to fire into different areas. And in that way, you get a different release of chemicals into the body. So then your body chemistry starts to change and your nervous system starts to relax. And all of these different things happen. Cortisol lowers, and through there, then you're seeking out more joyful things because you're not in that constant fight and flight in the body. Yeah.
Got it. And that's probably needed now more than ever. I mean, there's more stress, there's more uncertainty than probably at any other time in history. And I think as we evolve as a society and as organisms, we're 7.5, maybe 7.7 billion people on the planet. And, as we get more of us in here, then there's going to be more need for calming that fight or flight response and that stress. And so it's a beautiful thing. And so if you look at the term esoteric, how would you define it?
That's a good one. I would just say anything that, honestly, the woo-woo is what comes to me. Oh, that's woo-woo. Like even with acupuncture, oh, it's not a real science. That's woo-woo. I'm like, well, not necessarily. And then and the problem with it is also, with acupuncture is, it's not linear. It's not cause and effect. It's secular. So it's the research is mixed because it doesn't move the way linear Western medicine does. Yeah. So you're looking at something that's a little bit more in depth. And with acupuncture, you want to look at the mechanical body so often and how the mechanical body works, but then there's that layer of emotion and the peptides that get released. And in acupuncture theory, medicine is your emotions have such an effect on the body. That's why you feel sadness in your lungs. You feel anxiety in your belly. You put your pants when you're scared because those emotions move to different parts of the body. And if they're continuously stuck there, that can cause a physical issue. And so how do you look at that, and how do you understand that all emotions are self-regulating when they're moving in the right order and the right patterns? So when you're looking at changing the mechanical, it has layers, whether that's with acupuncture or with meditation, with shadow work, with gratitude. You're working on layers, and whichever layer you start on, you can work on all of them. So you've got the my practice is looking at the mechanical body and the healing, getting that going. And then you look at how are emotions involved in that? Where are they playing a part? And then you've got the spiritual side of that, and that pause. When you're in a treatment or when you're doing these practices, you start to get more self-awareness. But when you're outside of those practices and you're in your day-to-day life, that pause that you're learning in those practices, can you take them into your chaotic life? Everyone can be a monk on top of the mountain when it's quiet. It's coming down into the chaos. And you bring those tools there where you can pause for a moment, even an instant, and say, I'm going to make this choice because it aligns with my goals.
I love the layering idea, because I guess that's the esoteric part. It's like just digging into a deeper level of truth is essentially what you're saying. And it brings to mind a lot of patients who I've seen you do deep healing work with, and they still talk about you, a couple years later. So I have nothing but appreciation and gratitude, and it's for you. And it's so cool to hear you talk about these things, because I think there's a lot of depth that we miss out on in life. And there's probably more knowledge and wisdom that we have forgotten as we've evolved as a species than what we need to go and gather more information towards. And so that layering just kind of, it popped in my brain, where it's that's something that we all look at. So as you're going in, you talk about working on the mechanical level, the physical level. There's energetic pathways that then need to be addressed, and spiritual pathways. But where do you see most people get stuck? Do you feel like, is there a certain pathway that you're noticing? Is it grief? Is it fear? Is it anger? Are they pooping their pants too much, as you said?
Well, that has happened to me. No, I think that the biggest problem is when you look at where people are when they come in to see you. I don't know if it's just one, I would label one specific area, but your brain and your body are programmed to think that this is your normal. So whether that's high drama, high anxiety, if you're always in fear, it's not a place you want to be, but your mechanical body says this is what's normal. And that's your homeostasis. That's the level it wants to keep you at. So when you're trying to heal, you kind of freak out a little bit when you're trying to change those behaviors or, all of that stuff, because your chemicals in your body are like, oh, this is not right. We're supposed to be here, or, not down here. We're supposed to function up here. So a lot of people can get addicted unknowingly to stress chemicals, or to the drama, things like that. And it takes a lot of self-awareness to realize that that's just a mechanical response. But if you want to get into a healthier state of mind, you have to push through that to get a healthier body as well.
So that, because that change, you have to have a change of vibration. So what you're saying is there's got to be almost like discomfort if you're going to move towards the healing process.
Yeah, I would. For a lot of people, not everybody, but yeah, there's a level of, sitting with those, in the book, I talk a lot more emotional, and it's interesting now I'm moving into like a pain area, but, sitting with those emotions that are uncomfortable. So I grew up with a lot of anxiety, and instead of pushing it away, like you don't want to deal with it, you sit in it and you observe it like you would a rock that you found at the river. And you go, okay, where do I feel this? What's the sensation feel like? Because it's all sensations. And I like to use that word and change the dialogue in my mind. And where does it move? And changing the story that it tells me. Like, I have anxiety. We all have fear or anger or whatever, because our bodies love us so much. It's saying, protect yourself. Let yourself be embarrassed. Like I said, I was nervous coming on here. I have a history of anxiety. My body's like, don't get embarrassed. Like, it's a weird kind of morbid love, but it's still a love of protection. So if I can sit in it and not react to it, not go, oh, I don't like this, it's uncomfortable, and change the dialogue, then I can, it fades on its own, you know? So I'll say, I like a story or the analogy of, it's like a toddler, because I have one, where, you know, if you're working on something and you're almost done and they're like, mom,
Right.
and you're just like, just give me a moment, I'm almost done. Instead of just stopping and saying, yeah, 90% of the time they're going, don't even say anything. They have nothing to say. They just want to make sure that you're there, that you know that they're there, that they're, you know, I'm still in this existence, right? You can hear me and see me. And I feel like emotions do the same thing, where they're like, hey, I need a little love. And if you ignore them, they're going to throw a whole tantrum. And then they become overwhelming. And then it's really hard to kind of take it under control. But if you get into the practice of going, oh, I have anxiety, what is it? Therefore, you know, and that takes time, but it's a good starter place.
Well, we still have one of our teenage sons, Dom, who you may remember. Mom. I'll finally be like, dude, give your mom a break. She's trying to take a nap or whatever. You know, so that is just like what our emotions do, though. It's like, hey, Regan, you're not stressed enough. Are you working hard enough? Or did you forget something? You know, I bet you there is someone who needs some help, you know, and it just goes on and on and on. And so learning how to give it space, I think what you said is sitting with it. When you can sit with something and you confront it in the Zen tradition, it's like leaning into the sword. It's like, okay, don't be afraid of the sword, just lean into it and you'll realize the sword will just dissolve. And so giving it space. I remember I had a mentor who did this, he called it obnosis. And so you try to create, like, you put your problem so tight, because when we have a problem, we lose space, right? We don't have time and we don't have space. So it's just this weird kind of energy, you know, thing that we look at. And when you observe it really closely, then all of a sudden it started to break things up. And so he took it right down to our nose, and then we went layer by layer out into the world. And then pretty soon you're in the whole universe, and you're like, I guess my problem's not that big of a deal. I'm a little speck on this little tiny floating planet, which is another speck in this gigantic universe. So why am I putting so much energy on this thing?
Yeah, it's interesting. And we tend to want to run. We don't like uncomfortable. We run away from it until it's overwhelming, you know, and we seek pleasure, and then we just ignore the neutral instead of just enjoying all the sensations of being a human, which is all the senses and and I say sensations because pain, pleasure, and this is very Buddhist, you know, it all comes and goes. It doesn't last. But, you know, even with pain, like I said, the book's mostly about emotional mindset, but I started learning how to do all this with pain too. So, I mean, you can kind of hear I'm getting over a cold. I had a really bad sinus pressure over the weekend, and you know, it's like, as an herbalist, what else can I just shove in my face to make this go away? It was just so intense, you know, and you're steaming your face, you're doing all the things, and eventually you just have to sit with it, and you have to go, okay, I can't sleep. What does this pain feel like? Where is it? It's in my nostrils. Okay, now it's in my eyebrows. Now it's in my jaw, and it moves. And it's almost like a little dance. And when you can step back and look at it, like I said, observing a subjective experience objectively is very weird concept, but that's the only way I could fall asleep sometimes, you know? And so it's an interesting idea, but it calms your nervous system down so your body can heal faster, right? Because you're not fighting it. You're just observing it. And that's where, you know, they say long-term meditators have a higher pain tolerance. Like they've looked at heat with non-meditators and meditators, and the pain is the same input, but it's different output, and they can tolerate it longer or higher intensities.
That's interesting. So, I did not know that.
Yeah.
I still remember one of the coolest studies you shared with me on stress and the amygdala and the hippocampus in the brain, how in Harvard they did the research and they found that your prefrontal cortex shrinks when a person has a lot of stress, and then the limbic system, the part of the brain that's closest to the brainstem, expands. So crazy what it can do.
Mm-hmm. And that's where, it's interesting because we like to believe that nothing below our neck really exists. Like it doesn't do what we want it to do. It doesn't respond. And like, it's trying so hard. But it's so interconnected that your thoughts influence how your body reacts and how your body responds to life. And yeah, your brain is a big piece of that, of, rewiring it so that you can have a more joyful experience with life. And there's a book that I love. It's called How Enlightenment Changes the Brain by Dr. Andrew Newberg. And and they say in there, it's like our brains are already pre-programmed to seek spirituality and seek enlightenment and to find that joy. So it's already there, but we're not taught the practices on how to do it. Or the practices are woo-woo that don't really have any scientific basis, because I think we're so separated from energy and matter that, physics are the underlying reality of our existence, or math is, or whatever it is. Yep. There's this ancient practice in the East of energy work, and it's so separated. But when you look at energy on the lowest, smallest level, atoms use energy to make molecules. Molecules use energy to make cells. So we are both energy and matter, but we haven't been taught how to combine them to be healthy.
And so in your book, are there some takeaways, some things that, like, practices people can do? Because it sounds like it's a muscle. Just like if I'm going to build up my biceps, I'm going to be working them out, right? And so it's no different. Like gratitude, happiness, these are muscles you got to work on. And what you're saying is maybe even that, dealing with the stressful emotions is like a muscle, and it's hardwired, but we just forget to use that part of our brain. We're so worried about seeing what the COVID counts are, or whatever the latest stress is in our life, But are there some tools in your book that talk about that?
Yeah. So the book is kind of a weird memoir of the stuff that I've learned and that I teach, and then my own little experiences with it. So there is some humor in there. You get to get inside my head a little bit. But yeah, I wanted to have it be a practical book as well. So it can be read, as a, like, start to finish, or it can be used as, I want to learn gratitude today, or I want to learn about shadow work. But I did put different meditations in there and breath work. I wanted it to be where people can go, I can do this right now, wherever I am, without having to spend money, without having to, go anywhere. I can just go inside my mind and I can do a practice, or I can look at my breath. I can do all that stuff. So, yes, there's lots of practicals in there for you to play with.
And do you have anything on Comic-Con in there?
I don't think that I
Cami.
do.
So Cami, by the way, if you guys don't know what Comic-Con is, Cami is the world's best. What do we call that? Like, you dress up like so well.
Well, I dress my kids up as cosplay. Yeah, I always make their costumes, and they look good from far away. But if you get up close, you're like, wow, you don't know what you're doing. But that's okay. Yeah, that's what my kids and we love to do. That is go to Comic-Con when we were out in Salt Lake. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
I'm a nerd.
Yeah, we like nerds around here. I'm a fellow nerd myself. So one of the things I wanted to touch on is, you've got a lot of depth in Chinese medicine. I mean, going back and getting your doctorate, you worked on that while you had a toddler, a newborn baby. You're working full time, and then you're moving. Your husband almost got deployed to Italy, and then you kind of got stuck there in Minnesota. Hopefully I said Minnesota. So I'm trying to say it correctly. And so you did that in the midst of all these things, but maybe you could touch a little bit on the energetics of like the 5 elements and give people a little, like how the lungs relate to grief is something you mentioned earlier, or the large intestine, with letting go or holding on to things. But maybe you could just take us on a little trip around that 5 element theory and some of the things you've learned in your doctorate work.
Okay. I like the 5 spirits a lot.
5 spirits, that's great. Love it.
So
yeah.
that's where my brain goes,
Cool.
because it's very similar, but it's more alchemical, where, you're thinking of the mountain and there's a star above, and that's your Shen. And that's the heavenly consciousness that falls from the stars and lands in your heart space. And that's what in Chinese medicine gives you consciousness, essentially, or intuitive consciousness. When we have trauma, that spark flutters back to the stars until it's safe to come back here. And then you'll see people who are just almost disassociated. Their eyes are glossed over. It's like they're not present.
Yeah.
And they just don't feel safe in their own body at that point. And then you have the Hun, which is like the clouds around the mountain. And that is kind of like liver energy, where it's taking those divine or those inspirational ideas from the heavens and it's bringing it into your awareness. Yeah. And the liver energy also moves things. So a lot of times if patients lay down or if you lay down on your table and you're on your bed and you put your arms up, you're like, oh, your liver is a little stuck, because that's moving and opening up those liver channels. And that's, liver is also where we hold a lot of anger. And you see that a lot with alcohol, alcohol makes you feel a little loose and flowy. Some people have a lot of pent up energy in their liver. And then when they drink, it shoots up, and those bursts of rage is because the liver energy is not moving smoothly. Yeah. And I like to say too that when we talk about when we're describing things as Western anatomical organs like liver and heart, that's just, we're talking about energetic functions, not so much the actual organ itself. Because I don't like people getting too wrapped up and going, oh, what's wrong with my liver? What's wrong with my heart? But yeah, so then you have the Yi, which is where the earth and spleen. Yeah. Yeah. And so when the Hun takes those ideas, it's supposed to give it to the Yi. The Yi are like, you think of farmers that are singing as they plow the fields, because there's action behind those thoughts. If you're constantly thinking something like, oh, I should do this, I should do that, I need to do this, but you never do it, it knocks up that chi or that energy, your energetic being. And so the earth is like your center, and there can be some anxiety that pops up there. It's what's holding everything in, from a chakra point of view, that's your identity of self, not who other people see you as, but who you see yourself as. A lot of times,
sorry, which chakra is that?
The solar plexus. So it's
solar plexus. Okay,
that's more of the earth point, or the earth element.
So is that like Ren 4 solar plexus?
No, like 10, 12.
Oh, so it's up high.
High.
Yeah. Oh, got it. Okay.
You're thinking solar or sacral and root are lower. But
yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then we go like the Po is more of the lungs, and that's, it's kind of a different layer than the actual body, but that's where you get all of these like hidden gems almost, like all this stuff that you're not doing that really would open you up and help you breathe into who you want to be. But maybe it doesn't go along with, your tribe that you're already a part of. Like if you're wanting to branch out and be a botanical hippie that everybody you're around is like Wall Street, like it doesn't quite fit. So you don't really tap into those. But learning to uproot and to embrace those gems, it releases this deep grief that you might not even know, because the Po relates to our lungs, and that's where we feel that heaviness, because that's a metal. In Chinese medicine, it's a metal, which is, it's interesting. It's not quite air, it's more metal, and it's heavy,
Yeah. Well, and that's the connection to the animal world too. And my cat's name is Poe, and he's still alive. He's 21 years old. Brought him from Hawaii. Yeah, he's amazing. But yeah, he's a little source of inspiration because he's still alive, the guy.
Did you name him after Chinese medicine, or?
Yeah. He was a Hawaiian cat.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Kira got a kit. I got her a kitten last July, and she was, just a little over 2, and so the only thing she wanted to name him was Obi, because that's what she could say. So his name is Obi-Wan Benjamin Kenobi now.
That's great. Good.
Yeah.
So we've got the Po, and then the juror, I think, is the only one. And so tell us about the juror.
The juror is like deep water. I always think of it's like stillness and darkness, and it's the most yin of the body. And that's scary, right? All that shadow, all that darkness, and that's the kidney energy or the kidney emotion. But within there's that spark of light, or of heavenly inspiration as well. If you think of it like oceanic abyss, but where lava shoots out from it's cold, it's dark, it's scary, but there's this heat and this fire that comes out. And so that reconnects up to the gen and the light from above. And it's this whole moving energy that we want to keep flowing. So it gives us an idea of where kinks are within. It's almost like the psyche, but who was it? She wrote, I'm going to look it up, but there's a saying, it was like the universe is written by stories, or is defined by stories, not by atoms. She wrote The Speed of Darkness, Merle Regan here. I'm not going to say that right.
Okay.
But she wrote a poem called The Seed of Darkness, and the universe is written by stories, not by atoms, because how we interact with it and how we understand it comes from different ways, different stories we tell each other. And maybe that's mathematical, and maybe that's more mystical.
Right.
But it helps us. Yeah.
Well, and I think in the future, and even in the present, there's mathematics that are starting to explain a lot of the esoteric world. And so I just think our language hasn't caught up to our experience yet. Mm-hmm. And even in Chinese medicine, you bring up a good point. You're like, yeah, they have all these kind of esoteric terms like the Po and the Yi and the Zhi and the Shen and the Hun or the Hun. And you look at those and you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense. But actually, if you go back 1,000 years ago and you're trying to make sense of the human body, and if you're in an Eastern culture where you don't separate the mind from the body, in Western culture, we did that to break away from the Catholic Church so we could actually start doing some real medical experiments on people, which was interesting in and of itself. But just the fact that if you can learn a little, like a different language, it opens up your brain in totally new ways. And I think with this energetic world, it's a language that I've always been fascinated by. I still feel like I'm a rookie at it. So it's really, I love hearing you talk about it because there's a level of expertise that I don't have, but just learning some of those nuances in Chinese medicine, I think can take everyone who's listening today, dig in, because your soul is actually, there's some components to it that do relate to your physical body, and when you think of someone who has a lot of anger, like I guarantee you, we run their blood labs and we're going to see their liver enzymes are elevated, or their AST and ALT are elevated. They've got, fatty liver disease, which is so common in our society. Or you see someone who's afraid, and we look at their GFR on their labs, and they have this chronic fear and chronic stress and just angst, and we find that their kidneys are depleted. And so it's pretty interesting when you see the behavior and the psychology match with the physiology. And it's not, so I don't think we're that far out there, but I also think that there's still some missing components to the languaging. And it sounds like your book, you were able to kind of bridge that gap for us, which I think is brilliant.
I tried to. But again, I think that's interesting because I talk about that towards the end. It's like, there's a story I put in there that this monk, I heard a monk tell, that says this man lived at the base of the mountain. And I can hear my kid. Lived at the base of this mountain, and he always thought, I'm going to climb that mountain someday, and I'm going to see what's to see at the top. Finally, this day came, and he's like, I'm going to do it. And so he was walking around the base of the mountain, and he'd come across travelers, and he would ask each one, what path did you take to the top of the mountain, and what did you see when you got there? And they told him. And he's like, well, that seems too difficult. And so after talking to a dozen different travelers, he said to himself, well, all the ways seem pretty difficult, and now I kind of know what's already up there, so I'm just going to go home. And it's kind of like you can listen to so many people explain so many different views of something, like language. But there's something about being human that's, you can't explain certain things in our language. They don't compute, right? You just can't. And so experiencing it for yourself gives you a level of beauty that I think is confirmation that we are more than just matter. If our language doesn't even compute with the emotional and the energetical side of us, I mean, you can do your best, and that's why we have poetry and all those beautiful things. But it's really hard to explain the way music touches us, or art, or anything like that. So the language, while it's important to sort of get the concepts, but the application can be different for each person.
Yeah. So. I love that. I love that you bring art into it too. As you probably remember, I'm a big Picasso fan, and even seeing the way that he perceived things throughout his career, starting at the age of 19, where he's copying all the other artists, to a matter of perfection, which was insane. And then he became his own artist. He quit copying other artists and stole their techniques and started making his own art. But then as he got further and further along in the process, his art became so simple, where it's just like one line that's drawing an entire image, and it was just gorgeous. But he learned that art is just a language. It's just another way of interpreting the universe. But he hung out with mathematicians, with engineers. I mean, he had a whole swath of colleagues who had far different interests than his. And so I think the beauty of being human is we all have this gift to bring to the table with each other. But so often we get stuck in our amygdala, as we started the conversation talking about that kind of fight or flight mode, where we don't want to share, we don't want to express ourselves fully as a human. Mm-hmm. And you're an individual who's always stayed on the creative side, and you've been I put you in incredibly stressful situations. Like, all right, Cami, we've got new clinics and you're going out here. And I've always been impressed with your ability to stay grounded through it all. And even when you were afraid, even when you didn't want to do it, even when there was uncertainty, you just went forward. But how do you keep that, and how do you maintain the level of creativity, but also having the way of keeping your amygdala calm and staying calm in the midst of someone who has had chronic anxiety?
A support team, I would say, huge, 100%. We survive better in tribes. We just do. And as this last year has shown, we don't like to be alone. And so I think there's two pieces to that. So having a good support team. Yeah. Working at East West, I have lifelong friends. My ladies are I still talk to Cambria, and Annie, and, all of them. And people who have their own passion. I like that you brought up Picasso in his tribe, because it doesn't matter if you had the same people around you that had the same interests, you'd be pretty bored, right? You'd all be saying the same thing, or, just maybe slight differences. So having people that have a drive and a passion definitely help. And I like having I've got spiritual life coaches who I met through you, Brandy. And I have mothers and, all areas of my life. I've got people who help me with the business and different things. So whenever I feel stressed or overwhelmed, I have a group of people that I can go to and say, can you help? Is this normal? I like to be told, no, you're being normal. Those are fine emotions to have. And they can support you, and they can help you dive into what you're feeling and push through it, or say, nope, that's not the right path to be on, and take a new one. So that's what I would say. I mean, and then learning all this stuff that I have through those people and through these practices, helps me when I'm alone. But if I need a tribe, I've got it.
Yeah. I think that's powerful, and I think it's something we all need to remember. I look at the benzodiazepine prescriptions have gone up 38% since the lockdowns, quarantines, social distancing, all these things. Yes, we needed to take action, but now it's time to heal. Now we're looking at it and we're like, okay, we should probably create a group and a tribe. And that's one of the things we do on the show. And I want to express gratitude to each one of you for being on today and joining us in the conversation. And if you have questions, now's a great time to ask Cami any questions that you've got. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing quite as powerful as that tribe. I was at my son's track meet yesterday, and I got there the tail end of it, but I was able to see him run a couple events, and I was like, man, it's so supportive just seeing the kids run around the track, and everyone's like, oh, yay. Even this girl in the 800 was like a lap behind everybody, and she got the biggest cheers. I mean, so if you have any kind of insecurities about being part of the group or even participating in our community here, I'm going to tell you that we love everybody, and it's so fun just seeing all the different personalities, and there's not a one size fits all model as a human. So true. I think in the physical world, we want to pigeonhole things down to one thing, but in the energetic world, you just opened us up to an infinite amount of possibilities.
Yeah. And I think with tribe, having a good tribe also is a nice reflection to realize that, excuse me, that we need to talk better to ourselves internally too. I'm going to take a drink too.
Yeah. I think that internal dialogue, guests that we've had on the show, it's something that it keeps showing up. So, that internal dialogue is critical. So, you got any tips on internal dialogue?
Oh, so many. I like to change it, make humor come out of it. Or, I would say humor is my favorite. And I use that a lot with you too. Like you said, you put me in stressful situations. Right. Hey, our speaker is canceled and you've never done public speaking. So guess what? Learn this lecture and get out there. And I'm like, oh God, let's do this. But it's like, I love feeling frustrated, or I love feeling underappreciated or whatever. I love it so much that I have the spouse that I do, or the boss that I do. And it's so ridiculous that it changes your brain, because it makes you smile and your brain follows, because of course you don't really love that. Right. But it helps to be like, that's just nonsense and it's silly. Changing the dialogue for gratitude. And it takes some creativity, which is great, because that's the number one thing employers are looking for, right? Is creative employees. Sure. Yep. I appreciate the traffic today. It helped me. I got to listen to music longer, or excuse me, I'm feeling a tickle. Or I loved that the weather was so crappy because it mirrored my mood and I felt validated. That kind of stuff. So that really helps.
Because you're acknowledging it and validating that thing that's annoying you. Like, I love it when my wife nags at me. It makes me feel important because she needs me to, do some things around the house, so I need, that's where I'm going to shift it. I love it when you remind me I've got a honey-do list. So, that will be my dialogue, right?
It's kind of a fun thing. I mean, I talk in the book about, I feel like I might have a cough, but I talk in the book about, I always have dark circles under my eyes. I always will. It's just my constitution and I hate it, but it's there. And so how do you change the dialogue over something like that? So I would just tell myself like, oh, my eyes are tired from looking at all the bull hockey in the world. I'm going to say that was a Minnesota cuss word there. A bull hockey. Oh, that's bull hockey. Oh. Yeah. So like, and then from there you can start doing more self-care. Like I put oils and all kinds of stuff, on my face. And I know it's not going to go away, but changing that dialogue changes the way I see it, So.
Oh, I love it. I'm sorry. Cade just showed up here in the dog.
Cade.
You're going crazy. So tell us a little bit about, can you give us an outline of the book and what people could expect as they go to purchase it? Maybe talk about some chapters and concepts a little bit.
I've got it right here, so I can go through the full content. So, excuse me. So I start off with talking about consciousness and a lot of the different ideas of where consciousness comes from, because still not known. There's just ideas about it. What is consciousness? Why do we have an inner world the way that we do? And then what is alchemical magic? And, so alchemists back in the day used to try to turn lead into gold. Well, when you're looking at that emotionally in a mindset, it's turning those shadow emotions into a positive learning experience. They're all lessons. Excuse me. And then we talk about gratitude and how to be selfish. Words have their own positive or light and shadow meanings, and selfishness, being selfish, has a negative word to it, or a negative tone to it. But when you're looking at it, is it self-care or is it self-absorbed? And if you're going to have self-care and you're going to be working on yourself and you're going to be trying to do this stuff, it's selfish. It's very selfish. You're going to be so in love with yourself. A word you have to be comfortable with.
Love it.
You do. And then there's a whole chapter on how to deal with shadow emotions. And I did write the book for a general healthy population, but I do think that it's really great as an aid if you're in therapy or if you have some specific stuff that you're working on. There's a lot you can still use as a co-therapy.
And can you talk about shadow emotions? What are those?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
I like that term because it's basically all the emotions you don't want, you don't like, you want them to go away. It's like you're laying in bed and you kind of fall asleep and, oh God, I can't believe I did that 10 years ago or said that, or, the embarrassment, the anger, anything that's not joy or pleasurable. That's considered a shadow emotion because you want it just to go away. You don't want to deal with it. So there's a whole chapter on what that is, how to embrace them, how to change the dialogue. There's practices, there's meditation. So
that's awesome, because there's so many of our emotions. And when you call them shadow emotions, it feels like, you're going to have some bad, you're going to have off emotions, right? Negative emotions, whatever. Shadow is just like, with every, sun, there's a darkness. With every light, there's a darkness, yin yang concept. But I think it's important because if you can acknowledge those shadow emotions, takes you so much farther.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they don't go away completely. They're part of who humans are, but yeah, there's a whole chapter on that. Let's see, I dive a lot into why our brains are cosmic, like what makes them kind of mystical, flow state, a lot of that kind of stuff. There's a whole chapter on breathing and why breath is also healing. When Chinese medicine, the lungs take in heavenly chi, heavenly energy, right? So a lot of cultures use, like Hindu, Greek, Chinese, all their words combine breath with heaven or with like divine presence.
Yeah.
So there's something there. There's a whole chapter on healing with Mother Earth and nature. I go into a lot of chakra stuff, which was a little difficult to find valid Western science on that. So the book kind of swings back and forth, but I did find some cool research on and theoretical stuff on chakras, and it goes through each chakra, how to work with each one, and then there's a whole system meditation in there as well. Carl Jung, love him. So there's a whole chapter on archetypal aids and how to use your psychology with his line of work. And then the last chapter is called All Paths Lead to the Top of the Mountain. And then there's just a bunch of other little things that you can kind of add in and find your own way to get to this place of peace.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I think that's, if you look at the overall, the structure, the flow, like, I'm going to encourage everyone to pick up a copy of Cami's book, read it and study it, but more importantly, like glean the wisdom out of it, because, Cami's a healer by heart. Like she's got the gift. And so to be able to actually get that energetic expression out onto paper is a rare thing. Most healers just, we sit in our cave and we light some incense and that's what our preference, right? And the fact that you got it out and you're expressing it is such a powerful thing. Diane's wondering if it will be in an Audible book. Do you have any plans for making it Audible?
I haven't really thought about that yet. I've had a couple people ask, so I guess if I can find somebody who wants to read it. I don't know if everyone wants to hear my old Minnesota slang or
we want to hear it. Yeah.
accents doing all that. So possibly. I'm not sure, but maybe.
Yeah, that's a great question, Diane. And so if it does come out, we'll make sure and let the community know. We'll send an email out to let you guys know it's here. And so probe me, Cami, send me a text if you go down that pathway.
Well, and you can read it, Regan. You want to record it?
No, they don't want to hear my voice either. They're like, I hear his voice nonstop. So, but no, we'd love to hear it in your own voice. There's plenty of companies that can help you out with that too. Yeah. So what's just in closing here, I mean, I've learned a lot today. We've if you guys remember where we started, talking about the amygdala, the fight or flight, things that have surprised you, the evolution in your career. And then we went and talked about some of the esoteric nature of the body and just really disengaging some of those emotions, creating space around our problems, not taking ourselves so seriously. We covered a lot on Chinese medicine and the different kind of ethereal parts of it, but how practical it actually is if you just look at the expression of different organs from an emotional perspective. And then, we looked at all the chapters of your book, and there's some amazing things in there. I'm really curious. I want to read the breathwork part because Cami's a yoga instructor as well. And so just some incredible things there. So we've covered a lot of ground, but what have I not asked you that I should have asked you? Or what are some things we may have wanted to cover?
Oh gosh, I don't know. We did cover quite a bit. I don't know. I think I'm not sure. Just okay. I think we're good. Yeah.
Well, I was, if there's any channeling that you need to do for us or anything, I was just giving you the opportunity. So.
I know. I was like, oh gosh. No, all right, guys. I don't know.
Great. Well, this has been awesome. So good to catch up and to have some time to have a real conversation with you. So thanks so much for being in my life and for sharing your gifts and wisdom with the community, the tribe here. And
Thank you.
really appreciate it. Any final words of wisdom for us?
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for being my mentor for so many years and pushing me way beyond my comfort zone, but that's good, and I appreciate it now much more than ever. And just that this is doable. You guys all can do all of this stuff. So I wanted to put it out there so that I wasn't repeating myself all the time, and I could reach a wider range of people. So I'm really excited to get feedback. So let me know what you guys think.
Awesome. All right. We'll pick up a copy of Cami's book. It's in the chat box here. You can get it on Amazon. It's called Mending the Sacred Self by Dr. Cami Gillett. She's a phenomenal human being, an amazing healer, and a world-class acupuncturist and herbalist. So, Cami, thanks so much. And for everyone being on this, thanks so much today. We love you guys and appreciate you. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place.